Picture a scorched patch of land under an offer-giving sun, the charred remains of a dream left smouldering in the desert wind. Now imagine a solitary stagecoach rattling up the dusty road, delivering a young woman who has risked her every last hope on a marriage contract she has never seen fulfilled. She arrives in a place even bandits abandoned, only to find the man she came to wed missing, and a one-armed blacksmith standing among the ashes. This is the story of a promise tested by tragedy, a love born of hardship, and a will to rebuild when the world refuses to lend a hand. The hum of the stagecoach wheels vibrated through Lily Prescott's bones as she clutched her travel bag. She had lost count of how many days she'd been on the road, 3, 4, perhaps 5. Only yesterday, the driver announced that the next stop, Frontier's End, would be hers. The wide, barren landscape sped past in a swirl of dust and rock, punctuated by distant mesas. The driver had told her tales of wild outlaws, hidden silver mines, and the promise of new beginnings in the lawless West. Lily had listened silently, neither encouraging nor dismissing his chatter, for her mind was heavy with the uncertainty that lay ahead. Lily's parents had passed away from influenza 2 years prior, leaving her destitute in New York City. A chance encounter with a cousin introduced her to a newspaper advertisement, "Wanted wife for a homestead. Must be of strong constitution and willing spirit. Apply to our garrison Frontier's End." The notion of traveling west to marry a man she had never met was as terrifying as it was tempting. With her meager inheritance drying up and no prospects in the bustling but unkind city, Lily found herself with little choice. She sent off a letter. The reply came swiftly, a ticket west, signed simply R. Garrison. As the stagecoach pulled into Frontier's End, Lily peered out the window. It was hardly a town, more of a rough cluster of buildings, some leaning precariously, others brand new, thrown up to meet the incoming tide of settlers. At the far edge of the single street stood an unfinished church, wooden beams braced against the wind. Opposite stood a saloon with swinging doors from which raucous laughter spilled into the day. She took a deep breath, smoothed her bonnet, and prepared herself to disembark. The driver, a tall man named Hank Partridge, offered his hand to help her down. "Watch your step, miss. We don't get many folks coming in all refined like. Especially not these days. Frontier's End is more promise than place." "Thank you," Lily murmured, eyes darting about as she surveyed the dusty street. She was acutely aware of the stares from the few townsfolk going about their business. Men hauling barrels, a woman sweeping her shop's porch, a couple of cowboys hitching horses. A swirl of dread and hope danced in her stomach. Where was her groom? She spied a small sign reading, "Town Hall and Post" across the way. She had one last letter from R. Garrison, dated a month ago, instructing her to meet him outside the local blacksmith's workshop upon arrival. "The smithy is right next to the post," he'd written. Lily hoisted her travel bag, took a fortifying breath, and walked across the street, ignoring the dryness that pulled at her throat. The blacksmith's workshop was a stout building with an anvil icon crudely painted above the door. The windows were sooty, the door propped open by a large metal wedge. Lily peeked inside. The clang of hammer on steel startled her, reverberating with a ferocity that spoke of barely contained frustration. It was there she saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, a tuft of dark hair, and only one arm. The blacksmith wielded his hammer with his left hand, while the right sleeve of his shirt was pinned up, a silent testament to some old injury. He looked up suddenly, nearly dropping the hammer. The sweat on his brow dripped onto the molten horseshoe he was shaping. He set the tool down on the anvil and squinted through the haze of sparks. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his voice carrying both a polite curiosity and a wary edge. Lily coughed her throat dry from the dust. "I'm looking for Mr. R. Garrison. He told me to meet him here. I'm Lily Prescott." A flicker of emotion, pity or perhaps shock flashed across the blacksmith's face. For a moment, Lily feared the worst, that Mr. Garrison had left, found another bride, or perhaps cancelled their arrangement. But the blacksmith simply took a step closer, pressing his lips together before speaking in a hushed tone. "Miss Prescott, I'm Gideon Hawkins, the blacksmith here in Frontier's End. I'm afraid I've got some bad news. A fire ripped through Garrison's place last week. Not sure who set it or why. All I know is the homestead's gone." Lily's heart plummeted. "Gone, Mr. Garrison. Did he survive?" Gideon removed his leather apron, revealing the muscular form of a man used to physical toil. He swallowed. "They didn't find a body, but rumor is our Garrison rode off after the blaze. Folks said he was determined, vengeful, maybe went to gather men to settle a score. No one's sure, miss." For a moment, Lily could hardly breathe. She'd travelled all this way, staked her life on this marriage. Now it was in ashes before it had even begun. Her mind raced with questions. Where was she to go? Where would she live? How could she even begin to find the fiancé who might be alive, might be dead, or might have abandoned her? Tears threatened to surface. But Lily refused to cry in front of this kind blacksmith, this near stranger, who at least had the decency to speak to her directly. Her voice wavered. I have nowhere to stay. I'm alone." Gideon hesitated, glancing at her small trunk and the wide-eyed fear on her face. He sighed, removing a rag from his belt to wipe the sweat from his hands. "There's a boarding house down the street, run by Mrs. Connolly. She'll have a room. It ain't fancy, but it's a roof. Let's get you settled and I'll do what I can to help you sort this out." Lily nodded, swallowing her tears. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a name scrawled on a weathered piece of parchment tacked to the wall. James Addison Revis, wire for updates. She'd heard of that name in passing during her journey, something about a disputed land claim in Arizona. It struck her as odd seeing it here in the smithy, but now was not the time to ask. Outside, Gideon locked the workshop, and for together they walked up the main street, dust swirling around their feet. Lily could scarcely believe that a week ago she'd dreamed of stepping into a ready-made life. Now all she had were questions and the kindness of a one-armed blacksmith. Yet as Gideon spoke, instructing her on which saloon to avoid and where the best pies were baked, Lily felt a small measure of comfort in his steady presence. He didn't rush her or bombard her with pity. He simply stayed beside her, guiding her forward. She might have lost everything she hoped for, but maybe, just maybe, she'd find an ally here in this rough frontier. They reached the unassuming two-story boarding house, paint peeling on its shutters. A discreet sign read, "Connolly's Rooms. Meals. Decent lodging for decent folks." Gideon knocked, and Lily noticed the tremor in his left hand. She wondered how he managed to swing a smithy's hammer with such skill, especially if some old injury still plagued him. The door opened, revealing Mrs. Connolly, a woman of middle age with kind eyes and silver-threaded hair pulled into a tight bun. Gideon tipped his head. "Good day, Mrs. Connolly. This here's Miss Prescott. She's in need of a room for the time being." With that, Lily stepped inside, heart pounding. She felt like a leaf tossed in a powerful wind, clinging to any branch that might keep her from blowing away. If only she knew the fate of R. Garrison, the man who was supposed to be her husband. If only she knew why or how his homestead had burned. If only she could see a future in this harsh land she had just begun to call home. For 2 days, Lily barely left the boarding house. She paced the small room, listening to the bustle of the street below wagon wheels, neighing horses, the occasional shout. She examined her reflection in the tiny mirror, adjusting her blonde hair, trying to calm her nerves. But she couldn't shake the feeling that her entire plan, her entire future, was stuck in limbo. On the 3rd morning, Gideon knocked at her door. She opened it to find him holding a small brown envelope. "Got a letter here addressed to you, Lily. Mrs. Connolly asked me to bring it up." She took the envelope with trembling hands, heart racing at the possibility that R. Garrison might have sent word. Inside was a single note. "Miss Prescott, I apologize for the circumstances in which you found yourself. Regrettably, I cannot return for you at this time. The homestead is lost, and I am enlarged in a dangerous matter. Please accept whatever assistance Gideon Hawkins can offer. R. Garrison." A deep sense of betrayal warred with relief in Lily's chest. At least R. Garrison was alive, or so it seemed. Yet his cryptic words offered no comfort. If she had pinned her hopes on a man who'd vanished into the desert, then what now? As she stared at the note, Gideon shifted awkwardly in the doorway. "I know it's none of my business," he said gently. "But if you need help figuring out your next move, I can assist. I've lived in Frontier's End for 8 years now since my army discharge. I know these parts fairly well." Lily nodded, placing the note on the small dresser. I might." "Thank you," she whispered, tears threatening again. Gideon cleared his throat, as though uncomfortable with her raw emotion. "There's something you should see," he said. "Garrison's homestead. It's about a mile out of town. The authorities haven't done much, folks are busy with their own troubles. But maybe seeing it will help you decide what to do next." Lily hesitated. The thought of walking into the remnants of what should have been her life was horrifying. Yet she realized she needed to see it, to confront the reality and bury the illusions of a future that might never come. She took a shaky breath and met Gideon's gaze. "All right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's go." They set out in the late morning, the sun already scorching. Lily's parasol offered some respite from the glare, but dust clung to her skirts. Gideon led the way, his broad figure steady. He occasionally glanced back to check on her, slowing his pace so she could keep up. After nearly half an hour, the charred remains of a cabin came into view on a gentle rise. A wisp of black smoke still trailed from one of the half-collapsed walls. The smell of burned wood and ash hung in the air, oppressive and pungent. Lily's stomach tightened. "Here it is," Gideon said quietly. "The day after the fire, a couple of us came by to see if we could save anything. But it was too far gone." Lily stepped over the blackened threshold. Beneath the rubble, she could make out the shape of furniture, what once might have been a table chair's a bed. Shards of ceramic lay scattered. She spotted a lone photograph frame, the image within scorched beyond recognition. A pang of sorrow struck her heart. She'd dreamed of stepping into a functional home with a strong roof, solid walls, and a kind husband. Instead, she was sifting through soot. How did it happen?" she asked Gideon, her voice trembling. He rubbed the back of his neck. No one knows for sure. Some folks claim a band of raiders came through. Others say Garrison himself set the fire to fake his own death. There's been trouble in these parts. Skirmishes over land rights, water access. Our Garrison had a reputation for tangling with unsavory characters. Lily picked up a piece of charred wood, her gloves turning black. She stared at Gideon's pinned-up sleeve, a curious question forming on her lips, but she thought better of it. Now wasn't the time to pry into his personal history when she could barely piece together her own. Instead, she set the wood down, feeling the tears well in her eyes. "I left everything behind for this," she said, voice breaking. "What am I supposed to do now?" Gideon's face softened with empathy. "I wish I had an easy answer, Lily. But I do know what it's like to have your life upended in a flash. When I lost my arm, I was certain my future was gone too. Yet here I am." A faint breeze carried the smell of embers across the desolation. Lily looked around, imagining what might have been a horse in the corral. Children playing in the yard, a garden blossoming under the wide western sky. Now it was just ashes. She turned to Gideon. What if... She paused, her mind racing with possibilities. Is there any chance to rebuild this place? If I truly am free of any further obligation to our Garrison, maybe I could take over. I have no money, but I could work. Isn't that why so many come out here to claim land and start anew? Gideon studied her with a careful expression. Frontier's end is rough. Claims can be contested. Squatters might show up if they think the land is abandoned. It's not for the faint of heart. But if you want to try, you'll need help. A house can't be raised by just one pair of hands. Lily glanced around, the seeds of determination taking root. She hadn't come all this way just to tuck tail and return east with nothing but shame and heartbreak. She took a deep, ragged breath. "Will you help me?" Gideon drew in a breath, then nodded. "I'm no carpenter, but I can hammer nails with this left arm. Maybe we can salvage some of the lumber. I've got tools back at the smithy, and there's a well not too far from here that might still be good. But Lily..." He paused, letting the gravity of what she was proposing settle over them. "This'll be hard work. We'll be testing the patience of the land, and the locals." Still clutching the blackened edge of a beam, Lily felt a surge of resolve. "Then we test it," she whispered, eyes shining with tears. "I have nothing left to lose." Their pact sealed in the midst of smoldering debris. They walked back to town, hearts heavy, yet buoyed by a faint current of hope. As they departed, Lily caught sight of a single green shoot pushing through the ash. In that tiny symbol of regeneration, she found the courage to begin again. Over the next week, Lily found herself practically living at Gideon's blacksmith shop, while he completed jobs for the locals, shoeing horses, repairing wagon wheels, forging metal parts. She swept organized and tried to learn the basics of how to handle the tools. The heat was relentless, and the blazing forge inside the smithy only made the temperature more oppressive. Between tasks, Gideon and Lily spoke in hushed tones about the plan to rebuild. Gideon had scrounged up an old wagon, and Lily used her dwindling funds to buy scrap lumber and nails from the local general store. She was well aware that people stared when she passed, but she refused to bow beneath their scrutiny. Whenever Lily's eyes drifted to Gideon's pinned-up sleeve, curiosity pricked at her. At last, one morning after the store had delivered several planks of wood, she worked up the courage to ask Gideon if it's not too painful. "Would you tell me how you lost your arm?" He paused at the anvil, the horseshoe he was working on half-formed. Silence stretched taut like a bowstring. At length, he set down the hammer and turned to her. "I guess you have a right to know. You'll be working side by side with me. Might as well know what baggage I carry." Lily gently set aside a broom and folded her hands. "You don't have to." He waved off her hesitation. "During the war, he began, my unit got ambushed near the Rio Grande. It was chaos. Soldiers pinned down, bullets flying. I got grazed in the right shoulder, then took another round in the elbow. Gangrene set in. The field doctor had no choice but to amputate." He let out a breath. "That was over a decade ago. When the war ended, I wandered. Couldn't face my family back east, not like this." He gestured to his sleeve. "So I drifted until I settled here." Tears stung Lily's eyes. "I'm so sorry." He shrugged as though dismissing her sympathy, but his gaze lingered on the ground. "Some folks look at me and only see what's missing. But blacksmithing, it's given me purpose. I learned to adapt, changed my technique. I also learned not to rely on pity. That's why I was reluctant at first to help you. Not because I didn't want to, but I've been burned by folks who treat me like a cripple. I can't bear that again." Lily reached out, placing a hand on his good arm. "I see a strong man who's offering me kindness and a future. I'm grateful, Gideon. And if you need me to hammer nails, shovel ash. Whatever it takes, I'm not afraid of work." He offered a small, grateful smile. "You'll regret saying that when you're sore from hauling beams." Despite the seriousness of his words, Lily found herself smiling too. For the first time since her arrival, she felt a sense of genuine partnership. Together they were forging something anew, though they had no name for it yet. That afternoon, Lily ventured to the local well outside of town to assess its condition. She found the wooden crank rotting, the bucket rusted. But when she dropped the bucket, the echo indicated there was still water below. She drank from her own canteen, imagining the day she could draw fresh water from a properly repaired well on her own plot of land. She started back to the smithy dust swirling at her ankles when she ran into a couple of men standing in her path. One was tall and gaunt, with a cruel twist to his lips. The other short but stocky, scratched at his beard. "Well, look what we've got here," said the gaunt man, stepping forward. "You're Garrison's mail-order bride, ain't you?" Lily's blood ran cold. "That's none of your business." The short man let out a mocking laugh. "Watch your mouth, sweetie. This is Asa Burnham, and he's got a vested interest in that land Garrison left behind." Asa Burnham sneered. "That worthless patch of scorched earth is no good to you, missy. Garrison owed me a debt. I aim to collect. If you're trying to rebuild, that means you're interfering with my claim." Lily squared her shoulders, heart thudding. "Ah, Garrison never told me anything about debts. The land it's mine to work now." "Wrong," Asa hissed, leaning in. "You best learn quick, lady. Nothing out here belongs to you unless you can hold it, and from what I see, you're alone. But if you pass the homestead to me, I might be inclined to let you scurry off unharmed." Fear coiled in Lily's stomach. She thought of Gideon, the only ally she had. "I'm not alone," she said, voice unsteady but resolute. Asa's grin vanished, replaced by a sneer of contempt. "That one-armed blacksmith, your protector. Good luck with that. A single bullet or a well-placed threat, and he'll be out of your life. Understand, girl?" The short man spat in the dirt near Lily's feet for emphasis. trembling. Lily sidestepped them, refusing to look away. She knew better than to show fear, but every instinct screamed to run. "I won't let you bully me out of what's mine," she said, her voice shaking but determined. Asa snickered. "We'll see. You watch yourself now." They moved aside, letting her pass. She didn't dare break into a run until she rounded the corner. Heart hammering, she dashed back toward the smithy. Tears of anger and terror welling up in her eyes. When she burst through the door, Gideon turned alarmed. "Lily. What happened?" Struggling to catch her breath, she recounted the encounter. Her voice trembled as she repeated Asa Burnham's words. "He says, Garrison owed him. He wants me off the land." Gideon's jaw tightened. He set down his hammer, untying his leather apron. "Asa Burnham is trouble. Deals in shady loans, land disputes. Folks say he's got ties to outlaws. We'll need to be careful." Lily sank into a nearby stool, her hands still shaking. "I don't want to cause you any trouble, Gideon. But I can't back down now. If I run, I have no future." Gideon inhaled, shoulders tense. "Then we stand our ground. But we need to be smart. We'll check the claim office, see if Garrison properly registered the homestead. If so, it might be legally transferred to you. And we'll gather allies. Not everyone in this town is under Asa's thumb." A flicker of hope surfaced in Lily's chest. The West was known for its hardships, but also for its relentless spirit of possibility. Still, she couldn't deny the fear that gnawed at her. Asa Burnham was dangerous, and if Gideon was all she had, was that enough? She glanced at Gideon's determined face. He was a man who had already faced the worst life could throw at him. That knowledge steadied her, and she took a calming breath. "All right," she said. "We'll do this together." Gideon offered a reassuring nod. "We'll protect what's ours, Lily. Even if the odds are stacked against us, I'm not letting you face this alone." Though the threat loomed like storm clouds, she felt a spark of trust blaze between them. As they prepared their tools and mustered their courage, Lily realized she wasn't merely trying to secure land. She was fighting for a chance to create a life that truly belonged to her. And for the first time, she knew she had a partner in that fight. 2 days later, Lily and Gideon were back at the scorched homestead at dawn, their wagon piled high with supplies. They had hammered together a makeshift plan: first clear out the debris, next rebuild a livable one-room cabin, finally fortify the land boundaries. It was a massive undertaking, but neither flinched from the labor. Morning light bathed the charred timbers in a soft glow. The fire had consumed so much, yet with each blackened beam they removed, Lily felt a sense of cleansing. She wore trousers beneath an oversized work shirt, a concession to practicality in this grueling labor. Gideon guided her movements, showing her how to position her hands and use her legs to lift. Despite his missing right arm, his movements were sure and practice the product of years spent adapting. They worked in companionable silence, the sound of shifting wood and scraping metal filling the air. By midday, they had cleared enough space to begin marking where the new cabin would stand. Lily unrolled a rough blueprint she'd drawn based on memory and a bit of guesswork, and Gideon nodded approvingly. As they measured and staked the ground, a horse's neigh startled them. Looking up, Lily saw a man approaching on horseback. He wore a sheriff's badge, a new sight, as Lily had yet to see any real law enforcement in this town. He pulled up beside them and tipped his hat. "Mornin'. Name's Deputy Daniel Fry," he said, his voice steady, though his eyes were guarded. "Heard rumor you folks are rebuilding here." "That. So." Lily straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. Yes, sir. I'm Lily Prescott, and this is Gideon Hawkins. We're hoping to establish my claim. The deputy dismounted, casting a glance over the scorched earth. Well, I'm not here to stop you, but you should know that Asa Burnham's been in the sheriff's office spouting about how our garrison owed him big. Says he has a paper that gives him the right to claim this land if garrison fails to pay. Her heart lurched. Paper? Did he show it to you? The deputy shook his head, just waved it around. But the sheriff demanded to see official documents filed with the territorial office. So far, Asa hasn't produced anything genuine. Still, man like him doesn't need the law on his side to cause trouble. Gideon exhaled a long breath. We appreciate the warning, Deputy Fry. We're not looking for a fight, just a fair chance. Understood, Fry said, nodding. I've heard about you, Hawkins, good man, fair blacksmith. If you plan on staying, we need folks like you building up the place, not tearing it down. He turned to Lily. And you, ma'am, you're brave to stick around under such circumstances. But a word of advice, keep your guard up. This ain't the East. The law is thin, and men like Asa, well, they play by their own rules. Lily's voice was steady. Thank you, Deputy. We'll be careful. With a tip of his hat, the deputy mounted his horse and rode off, leaving behind a plume of dust. Lily felt a swirl of relief and dread. At least some form of law recognized her right to be here. But Asa remained a lurking threat. That afternoon, Gideon and Lily pounded stakes and laid the foundation for the new cabin. They worked meticulously side by side, the hammer blows echoing across the open land. Despite the back-breaking labor, Lily felt an odd exhilaration. She was finally shaping her destiny, one nail at a time. When the sun dipped low, they stopped to catch their breath. Lily leaned against the wagon wheel, her muscles screaming in protest. Gideon took a canteen from the wagon and handed it to her. She drank deeply, grateful for the cool water. He spoke softly, looking over the half-cleared plot. We've made good progress. By the end of the week, we might have a floor down. Thank you, Lily said, voice husky with fatigue. I couldn't do this alone. Gideon shrugged one shoulder. We all need help sometimes. A flush of warmth coursed through Lily. She remembered how he had hesitated to talk about his lost arm, how he admitted that pity was something he despised. In a way, they were both rebuilding themselves out here. Lily gently rested a hand on his forearm. I'm grateful for you, she repeated, and the sincerity in her voice hung in the dusty air. He gazed at her for a moment, a flicker of emotion in his eyes before clearing his throat. We should get back before dark, he said, breaking the spell. Tomorrow's another day of hauling and hammering. They returned to Frontier's End in weary silence. As they pulled up to the boarding house, Lily noticed the watchful stares of passers-by. No doubt the gossip had spread the mail-order bride was building a house with the one-armed blacksmith. Let them talk, she thought. Gossip didn't lay floors or raise walls. It would blow away like the dust in the wind. A few days later, Lily found herself at the claim office, a tiny shack near the edge of town, with an official-looking sign above the door, Territorial Claims and Records. Inside, an elderly clerk named Mr. Burton rummaged through piles of paperwork. His watery blue eyes scanned each form with painstaking slowness. Yes, yes. Our garrison, he muttered, flipping through dusty ledgers. Had a deed. Incomplete filing. Oh dear. He peered up at Lily over his spectacles. Says here he made a partial claim, paid a small deposit, but never finalized. The land is still in his name, but it's not fully registered. If he fails to appear by the next quarter, it reverts to open territory. Lily's stomach clenched. But I was supposed to marry him, share the claim. Is there a way to transfer it to me? Mr. Burton shrugged. Normally, yes, if you have a marriage certificate or a will. But we have no record of that. Without Garrison's signature or a legal bond, you don't have a direct claim. Still, if you continue to improve the land, and he doesn't show, you might file a new claim in your name at the next quarter. Frontier law can be lenient if you demonstrate occupancy and cultivation. Her heart sank. So everything depends on Garrison's official status, or his absence. The clerk nodded, shutting the ledger. That's the gist of it. Just keep your wits about you, Miss Prescott. This territory is full of opportunists. With that, he dismissed her, turning back to his clutter of papers. Outside, Lily took a steadying breath. She glanced toward Gideon's smithy. He had stayed behind to finish forging a large iron gate for the newly built school in Frontier's End. She wished he were here now to help shoulder the weight of this uncertainty. The road ahead was murky. If Garrison returned, would he even honor her? If Asa Burnham pressed a false claim, would he manage to oust her through sheer intimidation? As if on cue, a familiar voice called her name from across the street. Miss Prescott. A word. Lily turned to see Asa Burnham leaning against a hitching post, that sneer curling his lips. Instinct screamed at her to ignore him, but she knew better than to appear cowardly. She squared her shoulders and strode forward. Mr. Burnham, she said curtly. He glanced at the claim office behind her. Still trying to tie that land up all legal, huh? You can't say I didn't warn you. Garrison owed me thousands. You don't have the means to pay that debt. Do you? Miss Prescott. Lily's pulse quickened. I have nothing to discuss with you regarding Garrison's debts. He stepped closer, the stench of stale tobacco on his breath. Then you best reconsider your options before you invest too much elbow grease in that property. People might get hurt if they're stuck in the middle of a business matter that ain't theirs to settle. Rage flared in Lily's chest. I've got Gideon Hawkins backing me, and from what I've heard, the sheriff doesn't look kindly on men who make idle threats. Asa's smirk grew cold. Hawkins. The cripple. He let out a low, mocking laugh. That blacksmith's tough, sure, but he's got only one arm. Might not be enough to keep you safe. Don't push me, Miss Prescott. She refused to cower, though fear churned inside. If you had a legitimate claim, you'd go through proper channels instead of skulking around with threats. I won't be frightened off. His sneer turned into a sinister smile. Suit yourself. But be careful when you're swinging hammers out there in the desert. Accidents happen. With that, he turned and strode away, leaving Lily trembling. Once he was gone, she released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That man was dangerous, of that she was certain. She needed more allies. She hurried to Gideon's smithy, heart pounding. Inside, she found him finishing the iron gate, sweat glistening on his brow. He glanced up, concern etching his features when he saw her face. Everything all right? She shook her head, jaw tight. Asa cornered me by the claim office. He was threatening. He implied accidents could happen. Gideon set down his hammer, anger burning in his eyes. That's enough. We can't let him harass you like this. I'll talk to Deputy Fry. We'll see if there's any way to keep Asa in check. Lily nodded, though a sense of helplessness gnawed at her. Legal recourse was limited in these parts. She stared at the red-hot metal Gideon had been shaping, a symbol of resilience through fire. That's what she needed to be. As Gideon quenched the iron in water steam, hissed upward, swirling around them like a ghostly warning. She exhaled slowly. I'll head back to Mrs. Connolly's gather supplies. Tomorrow we'll keep working on the cabin. We can't afford to slow down. A faint, grim smile touched Gideon's lips. No, we can't. But be careful, Lily. He's not the type to bluff. Their eyes met understanding, passing between them. They were forging a partnership under threat, uncertain if they'd survive the crucible Asa Burnham would impose. Yet neither backed down. Somewhere in this dangerous land was the promise of a future worth fighting for. Days blurred into one another as Lily and Gideon raced against time and opposition. With each trip to the homestead, the cabin took shape. 4 corner posts sank deep into the ground. A sturdy floor was laid with planks hammered together by Lily's fierce determination and Gideon's tireless guidance. They erected the walls in a single grueling day, the sun scorching their backs as they raised the frame. By the time they slid the last plank into place, Lily's hands were blistered, but her heart soared with a sense of pride and ownership she'd never felt before. Every step forward, however, was shadowed by the threat of Asa Burnham. Deputy Fry had warned them that Burnham's men thugs who owed him favors or money might harass them out on the homestead. For a while, no one showed. Perhaps Burnham was lying in wait. Perhaps he was hoping they'd give up of their own accord. But Lily knew in the quiet corners of her mind that a confrontation was inevitable. A week after framing the walls, Lily and Gideon hauled a load of shingles for the roof. The sun dipped low by the time they'd finished stacking them near the ladder. Exhausted, Lily placed her hands on her hips and surveyed their progress. The cabin, though small, stood proud. Tomorrow they'd affix the shingles and finally have a proper roof. Gideon's voice rumbled at her side. It's nearly dark. We should head back soon. She nodded, brushing sawdust from her trousers. Yes? Let me just... A sudden whoosh and a dull thud made them both jump. Gideon grabbed Lily, pulling her to the ground, as another thud struck a wooden post beside them. Her heart hammered. Bullets. Someone was firing at them. Stay low, Gideon hissed, scanning the shadows. The burnt remains of the old house provided little cover, but they crouched behind a partly collapsed wall. Another shot rang out, ricocheting off a nearby rock. Lily's breaths came in short, panicked gasps. She clutched Gideon's arm, searching the darkness for any sign of movement. We're pinned down, she whispered. A voice shouted from the distance, carried by the wind. You've been warned. Leave now, or next time we won't miss. As she pressed herself to the earth, Lily recognized that voice, the short man who had been with Asa during their first confrontation. Terror coiled in her stomach. Gideon laid a hand on her shoulder. We can't fight them. Not like this. We've got no cover and no weapons beyond my revolver. He patted his belt where a small pistol hung. We need to get out of here. She peered across the open ground to the wagon. It might as well have been a mile away. But they had no choice. Okay. She breathed, her voice trembling. Gideon nodded, then motioned for her to stay behind him. Slowly they inched around the corner of the partial wall. Lily's heart thundered each second, feeling like an hour. The sky deepened to purple, and the shadows lengthened. Another shot whizzed past them, kicking up dust. Gideon fired a quick return shot, likely missing, but providing a momentary distraction. Run, he barked. They sprinted, hearts pounding Lily's feet, stumbling on uneven ground. A gunshot rang out behind them, then another. She felt a searing hot sensation graze her shoulder, but adrenaline pushed her onward. Gideon returned fire once more, covering her. At last they reached the wagon. Gideon hurled himself onto the driver's seat, hauling Lily up beside him. He slapped the reins and the horse bolted in terror, galloping away from the homestead. Another shot echoed in the distance, but the bullets no longer found their mark. They didn't stop until they reached the outskirts of Frontier's End. There Gideon reined in the frightened horse, breathing hard. Lily pressed a hand to her stinging shoulder, her palm coming away smeared with blood. "Lily!" he gasped, sliding off the wagon. He gently helped her down, his eyes wide with concern. "You're shot." She winced, tears pricking her eyes. I don't think it went in," she said, voice shaky. "Feels more like a graze." Gideon guided her into the faint lamplight from a nearby porch, carefully peeling back her torn sleeve. Blood trickled from a raw groove, but it was indeed a graze. "We'll get you to Doc Pemberton," Gideon said firmly, placing a hand on her good shoulder to steady her. "He'll patch you up." She nodded, biting her lip against the pain. Fear and fury warred inside her. Asa Burnham's men had ambushed them, tried to kill them. The reality of violence struck like a thunderbolt. This land dispute wasn't just words, it was bullets, lives on the line. Tears mingled with sweat on Lily's cheeks as Gideon helped her limp toward the local physician's modest office. Doc Pemberton, a wiry man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted them with a stoic calm. "Let's see what we have here," he murmured, ushering Lily into a small exam room. Gideon stood by, jaw clenched, as the doctor cleaned and dressed the wound. "She's lucky," he said, looking up at Gideon. "A fraction deeper, and it might have done real damage." Lily blinked back tears as the stinging antiseptic burned her flesh. "I'll be all right," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Gideon exhaled shakily. "You rest up. I'll settle with Doc Pemberton." Outside, while the doctor prepared a cot for Lily to rest on, Gideon paced the waiting area, fists clenched at his sides. Fear and guilt gnawed at him. He was her protector, and yet she'd been shot. He swallowed hard, recalling Asa's words. "That blacksmith's tough, sure, but he's got only one arm." His anger sharpened. If Asa or his men thought Gideon's missing arm made him less dangerous, they were wrong. He'd survived the war, survived desert ambushes far worse than these petty thugs. But it wasn't just about him now. Lily was bleeding. For her sake, Gideon knew they had to be smarter, more guarded. With that determination burning in his chest, he reached for a small scrap of parchment and jotted down a note for Deputy Fry. Word spread fast through Frontier's End that Lily Prescott had been shot at the homestead. Some townsfolk muttered in their cups that it was a fool's errand to build on contested land. Others, outraged by Asa Burnham's brazen tactics, began to rally quietly around the blacksmith and the newcomer. A day after the shooting, Deputy Fry strode into Doc Pemberton's office, face grim. "I've got men keeping an eye on Burnham's associates," he told Gideon, who stood watch by Lily's bedside. "But we don't have enough folks to protect every inch of territory out there. Our sheriff is old, and half the time he's traveling the circuit. We're stretched thin." Gideon nodded, eyes flicking to Lily, who dozed fitfully. "We have to finish that cabin before the next quarter, or the claim might be forfeited. But we can't risk her life any more than we already have." Deputy Fry's gaze softened. "She's got spirit, that one. Maybe more spirit than caution. But I respect it. Listen. I've spoken to Pastor Green and a few ranchers who aren't afraid of Burnham. They might be willing to help you provide strength in numbers. Burnham's men might think twice about attacking a group. "Thank you," Gideon said quietly, relief mixing with lingering anger. "I'd appreciate any help." Fry tipped his hat and left. After a moment, Lily stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and she tried to sit up. Gideon was at her side, instantly placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Easy, Lily. You need to rest." She blinked groggily. "Can't rest? Not when Asa Burnham's out there, ready to burn everything down?" He offered a small, reassuring smile. "Help is on the way. We'll finish what we started, but we'll do it safely." She relaxed, and tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You've already done so much." Gideon's expression was unreadable, a tumult of emotions swirling behind his dark eyes. "You're not alone in this. You never were." Within 2 days, a small contingent of supporters headed out to the homestead with Gideon and Lily. Pastor Green, a soft-spoken man with a broad frame, arrived with 3 parishioners carrying hammers and saws. Old Man Wilcox, a crusty rancher who detested Asa Burnham's loan sharking, sent his 2 sturdy sons to lend muscle. Even Mrs. Connolly, who rarely left her boarding house, brought a pot of stew and bread for the workers. They formed a defensive ring around the homestead, setting up watchmen at the perimeter, while the rest hauled supplies. The roof was first on the agenda. Lily, arm still bandaged, insisted on climbing the ladder to help. Gideon gently placed a hand on her good shoulder. "You stay on the ground, pass us the shingles," he murmured. "Doctor's orders." She bit back a protest, knowing he was right. From below, she handed up the bundles, while Gideon and Old Man Wilcox's sons nailed them into place. Pastor Green and his parishioners worked on reinforcing the walls and building a small front porch. Each hammer blow sounded like a proclamation of defiance against Burnham's intimidation. By mid-afternoon, Lily's shirt clung to her skin with sweat, but her heart soared at the sight of the cabin taking shape. People, relative strangers, had come together to protect and help her. It was a reminder that not everyone in the West was out for blood and gold. There was community here, if one knew where to look. Suddenly, one of the watchmen called out, "Riders!" A hush fell. Tools were set aside. Lily's chest tightened as she scanned the horizon. Sure enough, 3 horsemen appeared galloping across the dry plain toward them. Gideon climbed down the ladder, hands clenched into fists. Pastor Green stepped forward, his calm voice reaching all ears. "Stay steady. We don't fire unless they attack." The riders slowed as they neared the homestead. In the lead was Asa Burnham, a cocky grin plastered on his face. His companions flanked him, hard-eyed men with holsters at their hips. "Well, well," Asa drawled, surveying the half-built cabin and the small crowd. "Isn't this a party? Never thought a mail-order bride would attract so many do-gooders." Gideon stepped forward. "State your business, Burnham." Asa's grin turned vicious. "You're trespassing on land that belongs to me through Garrison's debt. Either you all clear out, or I take possession by force." Pastor Green stepped in. "You have no legitimate claim, Mr. Burnham. We've checked with the territorial office. Your debt is unsubstantiated." Burnham's laugh came out harsh and humorless. "Is that so? Who do you think you are, preacher? The law around here is the man with the biggest gun." A tense standoff followed hands hovering near holsters. Lily's pulse roared in her ears. Memories of the gunfire that nearly claimed her life made her tremble. She steadied herself, gazing at Gideon's resolute stance. He wouldn't back down, missing arm or not. Finally, Asa's gaze raked across the group. Outnumbered, he must have realized he couldn't win a direct confrontation. Instead, he spat on the ground. Fine. Build your little hut. But remember, this ain't over. Garrison's debt doesn't vanish just because you hammered a few boards. Sooner or later I'll collect. With that, he yanked his horse around, and they galloped off, dust trailing behind them like the tail of a comet. The group let out a collective breath. Pastor Green offered a quiet prayer of thanks. Gideon's shoulders sagged with relief, though tension still knotted his brow. Lily exhaled, her heart still pounding. This was only a temporary reprieve. Asa Burnham had made that abundantly clear. But for today, at least no blood had been spilled. They returned to their work, hearts heavier, but resolve unbroken. If Asa planned to collect by force or intimidation, he'd find that Lily Prescott, along with her new friends, wouldn't be so easily bullied. The cabin stood complete by the end of the week, a small but sturdy one-room structure with a front porch, a tight roof, and stout windows that could be barricaded if necessary. Over those days of construction, Lily had watched Gideon coordinate the workers solve problems with the skill of a seasoned craftsman, and even maintain a rotating watch schedule for their safety. Though she'd grown fond of his quiet strength from the moment he helped her off the stagecoach, she found a deeper admiration blooming inside her. He was not only a protector, but a builder, a man who shaped iron and community alike. On the night the cabin was finished, Lily invited everyone for a modest celebration. Mrs. Connolly brought her stew, while Pastor Green said a few words of blessing over the new home. The group laughed, relaxed, and exchanged stories until the stars twinkled overhead. For a brief, shining moment, Lily felt the warmth of belonging. When the revelers departed, leaving Lily and Gideon alone on the small porch, a soft wind rattled the newly fitted windows. Torchlight flickered, casting shadows across the desert floor. Lily leaned against the porch railing, gazing into the moonlit expanse. "We did it," she said, almost disbelieving. "We built a home." Gideon stood beside her, his one arm resting on the railing, the pinned-up sleeve stirring in the breeze. He glanced at the cabin's exterior. "You did most of the work," he murmured, a note of pride in his voice. "I just hammered some nails and kicked up dust." She laughed softly, though tears pricked her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you. I'd be lost in these plains if not for you." A comfortable silence settled, the kind where words weren't necessary. At length Gideon turned to her, his gaze earnest. "Lily, I know we came together under strange circumstances. You came here for our garrison, but, well, life isn't always so straightforward. I want you to know that I'm here for you not just as a helper or a friend, but if you want me to be something more." Her heart thudded, a whirlwind of emotions swirling through her. She thought back to the moment she arrived in Frontier's End, expecting a husband she'd never met, only to find a burnt homestead and an uncertain future. In these weeks of crisis and courage, she'd discovered Gideon Hawkins. Or perhaps he'd discovered her. Together they had forged something that felt more real than any arrangement sealed by distant letters. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she reached out her fingers, lightly brushing the front of his shirt. "I want that too," she said, voice trembling with hope. "But are you sure you want to be tied to me? There's still Asa Burnham, the uncertain claim, the possibility that our garrison might return." Gideon gently placed his calloused left hand over hers. his touch warm and grounding. I've lost a lot in my life. My arm, my old dreams. But I've gained something here that means more to me than all that I lost. If Garrison returns and tries to claim you, we'll face that together. If Asa Burnham threatens us again, we'll stand our ground. If you want me by your side, Lily, Prescott, then I'm right here. A sob of relief and joy welled up in her chest. She wrapped her arms around Gideon's broad torso, resting her head against his shoulder. His chin gently touched her hair, and for the first time since she'd set foot in Frontier's End, Lily felt undeniably safe. In that embrace, the fear and uncertainty of the past weeks seemed to melt away, replaced by the steady thrum of Gideon's heartbeat against her ear. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were bright with determination. "Then let's not waste any more time," she said softly, a half laugh escaping her lips. "We can't have a cabin and no wedding to fill it." Gideon chuckled, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "Pastor Green is in town for another few days. I think he'd be happy to conduct a ceremony." They shared a long look, understanding passing between them, without the need for words. Fate had turned Lily's arrival into a different ending than she ever imagined, a better one, forged through trials and a bond that transcended any contract on paper. They stood together on the porch, hand in hand, as the moonlit plains stretched out before them. The desert wind whispered across the newly built walls, carrying with it the echoes of danger, the memory of gunshots, and the promise of new beginnings. Lily pressed closer to Gideon, feeling the comforting weight of his arm around her. No matter what tomorrow brought, be it Asa's wrath or Garrison's ghost, their love would be the strongest foundation they could ever build. In the scorched land of Frontier's End, Lily Prescott arrived expecting a future written in ink, but found it forged instead in trial and fire. Out of the ashes of a ruined homestead, she and Gideon Hawkins built not just a cabin, but a bond sealed by sweat, courage, and faith in each other. Their story reminds us that hope can blossom even in the harshest desert, and that genuine love rises strongest from the embers of adversity. If this sour of grit, determination, and unexpected devotion moved you, please show your support. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you more inspiring tales from history's wild frontiers. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive, reminding us all that in the face of danger, hearts can still find the strength to rebuild and to love against all odds.